In the Wyoming winter of 1887, you either found a partner or you found a grave. Levi Shaw was running out of time. The newspaper crinkled between his weathered fingers, the words a desperate prayer he'd read for 3 days straight. Traveling preacher seeks to unite God-fearing souls. Good Christian girls seeking stable homes. At 42, with a failing ranch and a heart scraped raw by loss, Levi had nothing left to offer but ghosts and debt. He didn't know the girl who'd answered the ad was fierce, hunted, and running from a past that had already tried to bury her. He didn't know that in less than an hour, they'd stand before a dying preacher in a collapsing chapel, speaking vows that felt more like a business deal than a sacred promise. But out here, survival was the only sacrament that mattered. What he really didn't know was that his simple, practical solution was about to bring a federal marshal to his door, a man hunting a killer with a $500 bounty on her head. Dead or alive, the wind howled through the gaps in Henderson's trading post, a constant reminder of the winter coming to collect its due. Outside, the prairie grass bent low under a steel gray sky, a prison of his own making. Levi folded the paper, the cheap ink staining his calloused thumbs, and tucked it into his pocket. It felt like a stone against his chest. "You gonna buy something, Shaw, or just stand there letting my heat out?" Old man Henderson's voice was as sharp as the wind. Levi nodded toward the shelves. "Flour? Salt? Coffee? If you got any, that ain't been sittin' since statehood." Henderson snorted. "Statehood's a ways off. Territory coffee is all there is, and it's better than snowmelt." He shuffled behind the counter, his arthritic hands moving with a pained, practiced rhythm. "That newspaper keeping you up nights? Seen you reading it every day." "Just catching up on the news," Levi lied, staring hard at a sack of beans. Henderson had a way of seeing right through a man. "News," Henderson echoed, measuring out flour. "That what we're calling marriage advertisements these days?" The question hung in the air like gunsmoke. Levi finally met his eyes. There was no judgment there, just the flat, patient gaze of a man who'd seen every kind of desperation the frontier could cook up. "Sarah's been gone 3 years come December," Levi said, his voice quiet. "Ranch is falling apart. Can't afford help. I'm not getting any younger." "Practical thinking," Henderson said, wrapping the goods in brown paper. "Practical served many a man well. Question is practical enough to build a life on?" Levi thought of the crushing silence in his cabin, the cattle sold off one by one, the leaky roof and the mended fences that wouldn't last another winter. He thought of the thin gold wedding band in the tin box under his bed. "Practical's all I've got left," he admitted. Henderson leaned on the counter. "Practical's got its place, but I remember what you told me when you first brought Sarah round. Said she made you feel like the man you'd always wanted to be. That wasn't practical talking." The memory hit Levi like a fist. Sarah, 19 and so full of life, stepping off that stagecoach, running from an arranged marriage her father had cooked up to pay his gambling debts. She'd been running, sure, but she'd been running towards something too. "Sarah was different," Levi said. "She chose to be here. Chose me. It wasn't desperation." "And you think this girl in the paper ain't looking for a choice? Think she ain't running from something worse?" Levi picked up his packages. "I think she's 17 years old and scared out of her mind. I think I'm a 42-year-old widower who's forgotten how to talk to a woman, let alone a girl." Henderson came around the counter, his old joints creaking. "Let me tell you something, Shaw. I've seen all kinds of desperate come through that door. Desperate don't mean hopeless, and it don't mean worthless." He looked out the window. "My Martha answered an ad like that one 43 years ago. Came out here to marry a stranger 'cause her other choice was a workhouse in Boston. Scared as a cornered rabbit." Levi couldn't imagine the tough, witty Martha Henderson ever being scared of anything. "Sometimes," Henderson said, "the best things start with the worst circumstances. Sometimes two people with nothing left find something together they never would have found alone." Levi felt the newspaper in his pocket like a brand. What if I can't be what she needs? What if I'm just taking advantage? "Then you make damn sure she has choices," Henderson said, his voice firm. "You treat her like a partner, not property. You give her reasons to stay that ain't about desperation. Marriage ain't about what you take, Shaw. It's about what you can give. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. A mother hurried past, her two small children bundled against the cold. The sight was a knife in his gut. He and Sarah had wanted children, had picked out names for sons and daughters that never came. The fever took those dreams with her. "Preacher's supposed to be in Millfield next week," Levi said, his voice barely a whisper. "Millfield's a hard 2-day ride." Henderson nodded. "Longer if the weather turns." "I know. You thinking of making that ride?" Levi looked at his hands, scarred from 20 years of fighting this land. They were honest hands, strong hands, but they were the hands of a man who'd been alone for far too long. "I'm thinking about it." "Well," Henderson said, heading back behind his counter, "thinking's the first step, acting's the second, living with the consequences is the third. Make sure you're ready for all three." The ride to Millfield was a journey into nothingness. The land grew emptier with every mile, the prairie stretching to a horizon that never seemed to get any closer. He camped the first night by a nameless creek, the silence so total it felt like a weight pressing down on him. What kind of man answered an ad for a wife? What kind of woman put her life in the hands of a stranger? The whole thing felt like madness, but desperation had a logic all its own. He reached Millfield as the sun was setting, a handful of buildings huddled together against the endless emptiness. The meeting was set for morning at the abandoned Methodist church on the edge of town. It was a skeleton of a building, its windows like vacant eyes, weeds growing up through the floorboards. Reverend Crenshaw was already there, a man as worn down as the church, his suit threadbare, and a consumptive cough rattling his thin frame. "Mr. Shaw," he said, his voice a cultured whisper against the wind, "I trust your journey was uneventful." "Reverend, is the young lady here?" "She is," Crenshaw said, his eyes clouding over. "A spirited girl, Mr. Shaw. I feel it only fair to warn you. She may not be what you're expecting." Before Levi could ask what he meant, footsteps sounded on the porch. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the morning sun. Then she stepped inside, and Levi got his first look at Ida Mae Whitmore. She was small, barely reaching his shoulder, with dark hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her eyes were the color of a thunderhead, but it was her face that stopped him cold. This wasn't the face of a scared girl looking for rescue. This was the face of a cornered animal, ready to fight its way out. Her eyes darted from Levi to the Reverend and back, cold and calculating. "Miss Whitmore," the Reverend said, "may I present Mr. Levi Shaw?" Levi touched the brim of his hat. "Miss Whitmore." She looked him up and down, a frank, unnerving appraisal. She took in his height, his broad shoulders, the calluses on his hands. "Mr. Shaw," she said, her voice holding a trace of a southern accent. "I suppose you are." The Reverend cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should sit." They sat on opposite ends of the front pew, the sick preacher facing them from behind the broken pulpit. "Mr. Shaw," Crenshaw began, "you seek a wife. Miss Whitmore, you seek a home. Is this correct?" Levi nodded. Ida Mae gave a slight, almost imperceptible dip of her head. "Miss Whitmore has some questions for you," Crenshaw said. She turned to Levi, her storm cloud eyes locking onto his. "How did your first wife die?" The question was a slap. No euphemisms, no polite dancing around the subject. Just a cold, hard demand for the facts. "Fever," he said. 3 years ago. She was sick for a week. Then she was gone." "Do you drink?" "Some. Not to excess." "Do you beat women?" "No, ever." She seemed to accept his answers, ticking them off some internal list. "Your ranch. How much land?" 600 acres. "How many cattle?" 30 head. "Used to be more," she stated, not a question. "What happened to them?" "Sold them. To pay debts." "How much debt?" Levi felt a flush of shame. "Enough that I need to make the ranch profitable again, or I'll lose it." "And you think a wife will fix that?" "I think a partner might. It's too much for one man." She was silent for a long moment. "What would you expect from me?" "I'd expect you to pull your weight. Cooking, cleaning, the garden. Help with the cattle when needed. In return, you'd have a home. Food, shelter, respect." He paused. "And protection?" A flicker of something in her eyes at that last word. Protection from what? From whatever you're running from. The silence in the church was absolute. Her hands, which had been folded in her lap, clenched into white-knuckled fists. What makes you think I'm running from anything? Because no one answers an ad like this unless they have nowhere else to go. A laugh escaped her lips, but it was a bitter, broken sound. Fair enough. Yes, Mr. Shaw. I'm running. That's my business. It becomes my business if we marry. Would it? She shot back. Or would it just be something you could use against me? The challenge hung between them. Levi saw past the anger to the fear beneath it. She was terrified. Miss Whitmore, he said slowly, I don't know what you've been through. I won't ask, but I promise you this. If you marry me, your past stays your past, unless it threatens our future. And if it does, we'll face it together. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back with fierce pride. Why? She whispered. Why would you do that for a stranger? Because I know what it's like to lose everything, he said, and I know what it's like to be alone. Reverend Crenshaw cleared his rattling throat. Mr. Shaw, are you prepared to marry Miss Whitmore today? Levi looked at her, really looked at her. Not as a solution, but as a person just as broken as he was. Yes, he said, if she'll have me. She was quiet for so long he was sure she would refuse, would turn and run right back out into the prairie. When she finally spoke, her voice was a ghost. All right, Mr. Shaw, let's make this bargain. The wedding ceremony lasted less than 10 minutes. The Reverend's voice, weak with illness, echoed the ancient words in the empty church. Do you, Levi Shaw, take this woman? I do. The words felt rough in his throat. Beside him, Ida May was as still as a statue. Do you, Ida May Whitmore, take this man? A pause stretched, so long Levi's heart hammered against his ribs. Then so quiet he almost missed it. I do. The Reverend closed his Bible. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Levi turned to his new wife. She looked up at him, her gray eyes filled with fear and a grim determination. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His lips brushed hers, a brief, chaste formality. It was like kissing a stone. When he pulled back, she immediately looked away. Well then, the Reverend said, his voice too bright. They signed the certificate. Levi's signature was bold, hers was small and careful, as if she were signing away more than just her name. Outside, her worldly possessions amounted to a single, battered carpet bag. Is this everything? Levi asked, surprised by how light it was. That's everything, she said, her voice flat. The Reverend pulled Levi aside. She's been through something terrible, Mr. Shaw, he whispered, his breath catching in a cough. I don't know what. Be patient with her. Earn her trust. How? Levi asked. Keep your word. Don't push her. Don't assume this marriage gives you rights she ain't ready to give. The meaning was clear. This was a marriage in name only. I understand. I hope you do, the old man wheezed. Then I'll pray for you both. The journey back to the ranch began in a heavy, suffocating silence. Ida May rode behind him on his horse. Buck, her hands gripping the saddle, not his waist. As they stopped to rest by a creek, she spoke for the first time. What do I call you? Levi, I suppose. And what will you call me? What do you want to be called? Nobody's ever asked me that before. I'm asking now. Ida May, then, she said, splashing water on her face. It's what my mother called me. They rode on. The sky darkened, threatening rain. As they crested the final hill, the homestead came into view. Home, Levi said quietly. The word felt hollow. He saw it through her eyes now. The sagging fences, the unpainted barn, the lonely curl of smoke from the chimney. It wasn't much to offer. He dismounted and reached up to help her down. She took his hands for a second, then quickly stepped away. I'll see to the horse, he said. Go on inside. She climbed the porch steps and pushed open the door, stepping into her new life. The main room was clean, but it was a museum. Sarah's presence was everywhere. The faded floral curtains, the needlework basket by the rocking chair, the coffee cup still sitting on the kitchen table. On the mantel, a photograph of a smiling, dark-haired woman stood next to a younger Levi. Sarah, Ida Mae whispered to herself. Levi came in carrying her bag. I thought you might be hungry, he said, avoiding her eyes. There's stew. Where will I sleep? She asked, cutting through the awkwardness. Levi's cheeks colored. I thought you could take the loft. It's private. I'll sleep down here. The relief was so sharp it almost buckled her knees. I appreciate that, she said. After a silent supper, he carried her bag up the narrow stairs. The loft was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered by a wedding ring quilt. A large trunk sat at its foot. When Ida Mae lifted the lid, the scent of lavender rose up. It was filled with Sarah's carefully folded dresses. She put her own meager belongings in the small space left, feeling like an intruder. At the bottom of her bag, wrapped in flannel, was a small silver locket, her mother's, the only thing of value she owned. She placed it carefully among the dead woman's things. Below, she heard Levi making his bed by the fire. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror on the wall. A pale, haunted face stared back. It wasn't a home, not yet, but it was shelter. It was safety. And for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't wondering where she would sleep tomorrow. Ida Mae woke before dawn to the sounds of Levi moving around downstairs. The familiar routine of a house waking up was a comfort she hadn't realized she missed. By the time she dressed and came down, he was at the table with coffee and bacon. He looked up, surprised. Didn't expect you up so early. I didn't marry you to sit idle, Levi, she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. What needs doing? There's always fence to mend, he said, a hint of respect in his eyes. An hour later, they were riding out, Ida Mae on a small mare named Rosie that had belonged to Sarah. The air was crisp and clean. As they rode, he pointed out the boundaries of the ranch. The fence line he'd brought her to see was in bad shape, posts knocked down by winter storms. I see the problem, she said, dismounting. She knew her way around a fence line. My father had a small place back in Missouri, she explained, not offering any more. They worked together all morning making temporary repairs. It was hard, honest work. You're stronger than you look, Levi commented as she helped him lift a heavy post. Had to be, she said. Weakness gets you killed out here, or worse. The words slipped out, raw and revealing. She saw the question in his eyes and quickly changed the subject. We should head back. These repairs won't hold if a storm comes. The ride home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. The silence of two people who had accomplished something together. That afternoon, she explored the house. Sarah was everywhere, in the books on the shelves, in the garden plot behind the house. She found Sarah's apron on a peg by the stove. She lifted it down, holding it against herself. It was much too large. She was taller than you. Levi was standing in the doorway. Ida Mae jumped, moving to hang the apron back up. I'm sorry, It's all right, he said, his voice gentle. You'll need an apron. Might as well use that one. That evening, they talked. Really talked. He told her about his plans for the ranch, the debts, the struggle. What about chickens, she asked. Eggs could bring in steady money. Coyotes got the last flock, he said. I never got around to rebuilding the coop. I could do that, she said, a spark of purpose in her eyes. Build a proper coop. Get some hens. Geese, too. They're good protection. He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time not as a burden or a mystery, but as a partner. You've thought about this before. I've thought about a lot of things, she said, mostly about having a place to stay long enough to see them through. The first snow came a week later, a sudden white blanket over the valley. Cattle aren't ready for this, Levi said, his face grim. Need to get them down to the winter pasture. I'll help, she said, pulling on her coat. The work was brutal. The snow fell harder, blinding them, and the cattle were stubborn and scared. But Ida Mae was a natural, her small mare moving with a quick intelligence as she cut off steers trying to break from the herd. They didn't get back to the cabin until after dark, both of them soaked and shivering, bone-tired. As they sat by the fire, warming themselves, she asked him, Tell me about Sarah. He was quiet for a long time. She was light, he said finally. Like she brought light into a room. We met when her stagecoach broke an axle. 3 days later, I asked her to marry me. Ida May smiled, and I thought our courtship was quick. She could see this place for what it could be, he said, his voice thick with memory. We wanted children. It just never happened. He looked at her. Is that why you answered the ad? For a family? Partly, he admitted. Mostly I was just tired of being alone. What about you? He asked gently. Ever think about children? The question was a jolt. I used to, she said, her voice dropping. Before. Before what? This was it. The moment she'd been dreading. But sitting here, in the warmth, with this kind, lonely man, the truth came easier than she expected. I had a different life in Missouri. My father had a farm. When he died, his brother inherited it. Said a 16-year-old girl had no business running a farm. You lost your home. I lost more than that, she whispered. My uncle, he had ideas about what a girl under his roof should do to earn her keep. Ideas that didn't involve farming. Levi's jaw clenched, his knuckles white around his coffee cup. What did you do? I ran, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Middle of the night. Took what I could carry. Been running ever since. Now, now I'm just tired of running. He reached under his chair and pulled out a small, beautifully carved wooden horse. I made this, he said, his voice rough, for a child that never came. She took it. The wood was smooth in her palm. The craftsmanship was exquisite. It's beautiful. Maybe, she said, her voice small, you could teach me to carve. His face lit up. I'd like that. Outside, the storm raged, but inside the small cabin, something warm was growing between them. Understanding, shared loss, hope. Levi, she said, holding the small horse, thank you for giving me time. We've got time, Ida May, he said, all the time in the world. But he was wrong. Her past wasn't finished with her, and it was riding their way on a tired horse, wearing a federal marshal's badge. 3 weeks later, Ida May was in the new chicken coop she'd built, gathering eggs when she heard the horse. It wasn't a neighbor's ambling pace. This was purposeful, cold. Through the slats in the wood, she saw a lone rider, a tall man in a long coat, dismount in front of the cabin. Her blood turned to ice. Levi stepped out onto the porch. Can I help you? The stranger's voice carried on the wind, flat and dangerous. Name's Garrett, federal marshal. I'm looking for someone. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. Girl by the name of Ida May Whitmore. About 17, dark hair, small build. Seen anyone like that? Ida May pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't her uncle. This was the law, and the law meant a rope. Can't say that I have, Levi said, his voice steady. Mind telling me what she's wanted for? Garrett unfolded the paper. It was a wanted poster. Her face, crudely sketched, stared back at her from across the yard. Bank robbery in Kansas. Farmers Trust in Dodge City. 3 men and a girl. Got away with $4,000. That's a serious charge, Levi said. Serious enough. Garrett's voice was grim. One of the tellers was shot. Died 3 days later. Makes it a hanging offense. Panic clawed at her throat. She remembered Dodge City. Remembered the 3 brutal men who'd found her on the road, half-starved and desperate. They'd forced her to hold their horses, a young girl waiting outside a bank. The perfect cover. She'd tried to run when the shooting started, but they'd caught her, threatened to kill her if she didn't stay quiet. They dragged her with them for 2 days before abandoning her near the Colorado border. She'd never seen a penny of the money, but she knew her word meant nothing. I'll keep an eye out, Levi was saying. Good, Garrett said, swinging back into his saddle. There's a $500 reward, dead or alive. $500. More money than the ranch would see in a year. Enough to pay off the mortgage, buy new stock, save everything he'd worked for. The marshal rode away. Ida May stayed frozen, her mind screaming, Run! Run now! But her feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. When she finally stumbled out of the coop, Levi was standing in the barn doorway, his face a mask. How long were you standing there? She whispered. Long enough. He stepped inside, closing the big barn door behind them. plunging them into dusty semi-darkness. "Ida Mae Whitmore," he said, his voice quiet and heavy. "The bank robbery. You want to tell me about that?" She looked at the man who had shown her nothing but kindness, the man whose life she was about to destroy. "You could turn me in," she said, her voice hollow. "$500 would solve a lot of your problems." "That's not what I asked." She sank onto a bale of hay, the strength gone from her legs. "I didn't rob that bank, Levi. But I was there, and a man died. In the eyes of the law, that makes me a killer." She told him everything, running from her uncle, the men on the road, holding the horses, the gunshot, the fear. "What happened to the men who did it?" he asked when she finished. "I don't know. They left me. I've been running ever since." She looked up at him, at the conflict in his honest face. "Now I have to run again. Tonight, before he comes back." "Where will you go?" "West Canada, somewhere." "And leave me to explain where my wife disappeared to?" She hadn't thought of that. Of him. "You could say I left you, that it didn't work out." "I could," he said, moving to sit beside her on the hay. "But I won't have to, because you're not leaving." She stared at him, sure she'd misheard. "Levi, you don't understand. I'm wanted for murder. If they find me here, you'll lose everything. Your ranch, your freedom. They'll hang you right alongside me." "I could," he said. He was so close she could feel the heat from his body. "But I won't lose the best thing that's happened to me in 3 years. I'm not worth that risk. That's not your decision to make." He turned to face her, his gaze intense. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because you're my wife," he said, his voice thick with an emotion she didn't dare name. "Because you've given me more hope than I've had since Sarah died. Because I believe you, and because sometimes doing the right thing matters more than doing the safe thing." "He'll be back," she said, her voice trembling. "He'll recognize me." "Then we'll figure out how to prove you're innocent," he said. "And if we can't, then we'll deal with that too. Together." Hope. It was a fragile, terrifying thing. "There's something else," she said. "My real name isn't Whitmore. It's Sullivan. Ida Mae Sullivan. I used my mother's maiden name to hide." "Ida Mae Sullivan," he repeated, testing the sound of it. "I like it. Levi Shaw and Ida Mae Sullivan. Sounds like a couple who might just have a future." But they both knew that future was balanced on a knife's edge, and the marshal was coming back to make them fall. The next 3 days were a waking nightmare. Every snap of a twig, every rider on the horizon, sent a jolt of terror through Ida Mae. Levi moved his father's old Winchester from its place over the mantel to the wall beside the kitchen door. He didn't say anything, but she saw him checking the ammunition. "We need a plan," he said on the third morning. "Can't just wait for him to kick in the door." "What kind of plan?" "I ride into town, send a telegram to the sheriff in Dodge City, see what evidence they really have. If it's just the word of those 3 killers, we have a chance." "What if the marshal comes back while you're gone?" "You hide," he said, his voice firm. "Root cellar. Don't answer the door. He needs a warrant to search the place." He reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. The warmth of it was the only real thing in her spinning world. "We'll get through this, Ida Mae. Together." He left an hour later. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Every creak of the floorboards was the marshal's boot. Every gust of wind was his voice. Late that afternoon, she heard hoofbeats. Her heart leaped into her throat. But it wasn't Garrett. It was their nearest neighbor, Martha Henley, a tough, no-nonsense woman in her 50s. "Mrs. Shaw," Martha called from the yard. Ida Mae opened the door, her hands trembling. Martha stepped inside, her sharp eyes taking in everything. "There's been a federal marshal asking questions," she said, getting straight to the point, "about a young woman matching your description. I thought you should know." "What? What sort of questions?" "The kind that suggests someone's in trouble," Martha said, accepting the cup of coffee Ida Mae shakily offered. "I also thought you should know that not everyone in this valley is eager to help federal marshals. We came west to get away from government men poking around in our business." She leaned forward, her gaze direct. "Whatever trouble you're in, Mrs. Shaw, it's none of their concern. If anyone asks us, You're a good neighbor and a good wife to Levi. That's all we know. Tears pricked Ida May's eyes. This stern woman who barely knew her was offering a shield. Just then, Levi returned. Martha, he said, nodding a greeting. Levi, she said, I was just telling your wife that the marshal's been nosing around, and that Bill Henderson over at the trading post has been asking some mighty pointed questions, the kind of questions a man asks when he's thinking about a reward. The blood drained from Ida May's face. Henderson. He knew about the advertisement. He could put the pieces together. There's something else, Martha said, pulling a worn letter from her pocket. My husband's brother lives near Dodge City. He was there the day of the robbery. He says the girl with those robbers wasn't a girl at all. Said she was a woman in her 20s with blonde hair, and she was the one giving the orders. The room tilted. A witness, a real witness, who could clear her. Would your brother-in-law swear to that in court? Levi asked, his voice tight with excitement. He's not a man who likes seeing innocent folk railroaded, Martha said. I reckon he would. After she left, the cabin buzzed with a dangerous, fragile hope. We need to contact him, Levi said. Get a sworn statement. But what about Henderson? Ida May asked. If he's already suspicious, how long until he goes back to the marshal? Not long, Levi said grimly, which means we need to move fast. That night, Levi took down the Winchester and began to clean it. Know how to use one of these? He asked. My father taught me, she said. He said a woman on the frontier needed to know how to protect herself. Good, he said, his eyes dark, because if things go bad, I might need you to cover my back. The casual trust in his voice was a physical blow. No one had ever trusted her with anything but their own dark intentions. Levi, she said, her voice thick, if this goes wrong, if they take me, I want you to know, these past few weeks, they've been the best of my life. He set the rifle down and turned to her. They won't take you, he said, his voice a low growl. You belong here, with me, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take that away from us. Tomorrow the reckoning would come. Marshal Garrett would be back. But tonight, for the first time, she wasn't just a fugitive. She was Ida May Sullivan Shaw, and she was home, and she would fight for it. Garrett arrived at dawn. He wasn't alone. From the loft window, Ida May saw 3 riders against the rising sun. Garrett, Bill Henderson, his face smug with greed, and a younger man wearing a deputy's badge. Levi, she called down, her voice a choked whisper. They're here. He appeared at the bottom of the stairs, the Winchester in his hands. How many? 3. All right, he said, his voice impossibly calm. Remember the plan. She nodded, her heart trying to batter its way out of her chest. She took her position by the kitchen window, hidden from view. Levi went to the door, opening it just enough to block the entrance with his body. Shaw, Garrett called. Federal Marshal, we need to talk. Back again so soon, Marshal. Got some new information, Garrett said, dismounting. Mr. Henderson here tells me you married your wife in a mighty big hurry, and her name doesn't seem to be the one she was born with. He held up the wanted poster. Ida May Whitmore. Ring any bells? Can't say it does. Really? Garrett pressed. Because Mr. Henderson saw her with his own eyes. Says she's the girl in this picture. No doubt about it. Where is she now, Shaw? Visiting neighbors, Levi lied smoothly. Won't be back till evening. Convenient, Garrett sneered. You won't mind if we take a look around then? Actually, I would, Levi said, his voice cold. Not without a warrant. Warrant's on its way, Garrett said. But harboring a fugitive is a federal crime, Shaw. Could see you hanged right alongside her. The threat hung in the air. Ida May saw Levi's knuckles go white on the stock of the rifle. Or, Henderson piped up, we could settle this right now. $500 is a lot of money, Shaw. Enough to save this worthless ranch. Just turn her over. The offer was a snake, coiled and ready to strike. The price of his future for the price of her life. She held her breath. I appreciate the offer, Henderson. Levi's voice rang out, clear and steady. But I'm not in the habit of selling my wife to the highest bidder. The words were a declaration of war. Garrett's hand dropped to his gun. So you admit she's here? I admit she's my wife, Levi said, and I don't recognize the law's right to condemn an innocent woman. Ida Mae knew she couldn't let him do this. She couldn't let him die for her. Before he could stop her, she pushed past him and stepped onto the porch, her hands held out where they could see them. It's all right, Levi. Ida Mae, no! But it was too late. Garrett's gun was instantly in his hand. The deputy raised his rifle. Ida Mae Whitmore, Garrett said with grim satisfaction. You're under arrest for robbery and murder. My name is Ida Mae Shaw, she said, her chin high, and I didn't murder anyone. You'll come with us peacefully, Garrett ordered, or by force. Actually, a new voice cut through the tension. There's a third choice. Everyone spun around. Martha Henley was riding into the yard, her husband Tom beside her, and behind them were three other neighbors. All of them were armed. Garrett's face went pale. The odds had just changed. Mrs. Henley, he said, his voice tight, this is federal business. Don't interfere. Wouldn't dream of it, Martha said, dismounting. She held up a piece of paper. Just came to deliver this telegram from my brother-in-law in Dodge City. He was a witness to the robbery. Garrett's eyes narrowed. What's it say? Says the girl with the robbers was blonde, Martha said, her voice carrying across the yard like a judge's sentence. Says she was older, and says she was giving the orders. It also says the real robbers were caught 3 days ago in Missouri. They confessed to everything. The silence was deafening. That telegram could be a fake, Henderson sputtered. Could be, Tom Henley said, holding up a second telegram. But I doubt the sheriff in Dodge City would send a fake one confirming all charges against Miss Whitmore have been dropped. Martha handed the second paper to Garrett. He read it, his face turning to ash. Well, the deputy demanded. Charges have been dropped, Garrett said, his voice flat. She's been cleared. The world dissolved into a roaring in Ida Mae's ears. She felt her knees buckle. Levi's arms shot around her, holding her up. Seems you made this trip for nothing, Marshal, Tom Henley said, a grim smile on his face. Seems so, Garrett mumbled, his professional pride shattered. Mrs. Shaw, my apologies. She was already free, Levi said, his voice like stone. Free and on my land, under my protection. Henderson, seeing the reward money vanish, started to protest. Now wait a minute, I was acting on good information. You were acting on greed, Bill. Martha cut him off, her voice dripping with contempt. $500 looked good enough to turn on your neighbors. Henderson shrank under the collective glare of the people he had to live with. He had betrayed their unspoken code. He was an outcast. As the neighbors and the defeated lawmen rode away, Ida Mae sagged against Levi. It was over. After all the running, all the fear, she was free, and she was home. 6 months later, the valley was bursting with the green of a new spring. Ida Mae stood on the porch, watching Levi work with the new horses in the corral. The ranch was coming back to life, and so were they. Wagons began arriving. The Henleys, and behind them, other neighbors, all bringing covered dishes and musical instruments. Martha had insisted on a proper wedding reception to welcome the new Mrs. Shaw into the community that had fought for her. Looks like Martha brought the whole county, Levi said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. The gesture was easy now, familiar. She said she wanted to do this right, Ida Mae replied, leaning back against his chest. Any regrets? He asked quietly. It was a question he still asked sometimes, a quiet check-in, a reminder that their beginning was a bargain, not a promise. None, she said, turning in his arms to face him. Not a single one. She had found love where she'd only been looking for shelter. They had built something real out of desperation and hope. Good, he said and kissed her, because I have something for you. He pulled a small cloth from his pocket. Inside was a simple, newly forged gold band. We never did have proper rings, he said, sliding it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It was hers. The celebration was a joyous, noisy affair. A circuit preacher, Reverend Walsh, had arrived that morning. He asked if they'd like to renew their vows. Standing before their friends, the community that had become their family, they spoke the words again. This time, there was no desperation in their voices, only love. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the preacher declared with a grin. Again. As the party wound down, Levi led her up the hill behind the cabin. Below them, lanterns twinkled in the dusk. Look, he said, pointing to the pasture. 40 head of cattle, and those horses are attracting buyers from as far as Denver. The ranch is thriving, she said. We should be proud, he corrected her. None of this was possible without you. He was right. Her chickens, her garden, her sheer grit had given them the breathing room they needed. Her partnership had given him the courage to dream again. What do you see when you look at this place now? He asked. I see a home, she said simply. I see children playing in that yard someday. I see all the ordinary, beautiful days that make up a life. Children, he repeated softly. You'd want that? With you? Yes, very much. They stood in comfortable silence, the last of the music drifting up from the valley below. Do you remember what Henderson told me that first day? Levi asked, about how sometimes the best things in life start with the worst circumstances? I remember. He was right about that, wasn't he? She looked at the cabin, her home, at the man who had given her his name, his protection, and his heart. Yes, she said, squeezing his hand. He was absolutely right. Love had taken root in the harshest soil and bloomed. The desperate bargain had become a precious gift. And in the morning, they would wake up together and continue to build their future, one sunrise at a time. If you enjoyed this story, I've got another one coming tomorrow that you won't want to miss. So make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so you don't miss it.